I'm going to assume we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome and welcome to Coffee with Dr. Tom. This is going to be a 7-day workshop, 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to try my best to keep it in that time frame every day. And day 8 will be questions and answers. So you can send your questions in at any time, and we will accumulate them to make sure they all get answered during this event on day 8. My purpose here is to give everyone a big picture view and to be able to take a deep breath and look at, okay, what do I need to do for myself and my family? So thank you all very much for spending your precious time with me here, and I will do my best to make it something that will be of great value for you and your family. So any slide that starts with a pearl, with a picture of pearls, it's a pearl, meaning this is something you want to pick up on, and there's some action steps that you can take or ways to think about a problem. So the first one, the first pearl, is something that's been known for thousands of years. And if you saw some of the announcements I sent out, reality check. So here comes a reality check. Prevention is the ultimate principle of wisdom. To cure a disease after it's manifested is like digging a well when one is thirsty or forging a weapon after the war has begun. And this came from the 3rd century BC in a classic healthcare guide out of China called the Yellow Emperor's Handbook. And this just makes sense. And unfortunately, most of us are stuck in this position of digging a well when one is thirsty, you know, that we have some concerns about our immune system and how it's functioning. So this is just a heads up that we may want to change the way that we've been looking at supporting our immune system and what kind of a priority have we made it in our lives. So this article came out in the British Medical Journal just a few weeks ago. And they said that the clinical features of COVID-19 are well documented, with most people displaying mild symptoms or no symptoms at all. Once again, most people. And deaths occurring mainly in the elderly and the chronically ill patients. So we've heard something about that on and off, but this is a summary of what is accurate about COVID-19, that many of us will get it and we'll never know we got it, or we'll have a sore throat for a day. This is not the public perception as played out in the media and reinforced by gunpoint quarantine. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement coming from the British Medical Journal, but it's accurate in terms of what's happening in so many places in the world. That's not to question the incredible value of quarantine and isolation and not hanging out with a bunch of people, but there's a reality check here as to how we're looking at this thing. And this one also came out just about a month ago. According to the US Center for Disease Control, that's the CDC, during the period of 2010 to 2019, every year, symptomatic illness affects 9 million to 45 million people, resulting in 4 million to 21 million medical visits, 140,000 to 810,000 hospitalizations, and 23,000 to 61,000 deaths. Every year from the flu, we have somewhere between 23,000 and 61,000 deaths every year. So most of us don't know that because there's never been a big deal made about it. It's important, it's very important, and many of us have loved ones or elders that have fallen prey to the flu in the last 10 years and may not have survived from it just from the flu. But keep these numbers in mind. 61,000 deaths, somewhere between 21 and 61,000 deaths a year. And let's look at what we know. This came out this morning from Johns Hopkins University, and it's the daily total of COVID-19. And so far, all over the world, we've had about 48,000 deaths from COVID-19. Now, that's nothing to sneeze at, and I don't mean to make a pun here, but that's important to know. But let's do a reality check and look back at what we just saw in the previous slide, that 23,000 to 61,000 deaths occurred every year in the last 10 years in the US from the flu. And we have 48,000 deaths so far in the entire world for COVID-19. So do know that this is important and we have to take it seriously, but reality check in terms of what has been happening in the US every single year that no one knew about. And if we look on the left side of this screen in terms of confirmed cases, we see the US has taken the #1 position over Italy by almost double the number of cases that are in Italy. And we've been hearing from our experts that it's going to be another 2 to 3 weeks or more before this number of cases in the US will probably peak and then start to drop down. So we haven't gotten to the worst of this yet. But reality check, every year, 21,000 to 60,000+ people die in the US from the flu. And we don't pay it second attention. When you hear somebody's got the flu, oh, it's too bad, I hope you get over it soon. Someone's got COVID-19, the vast majority of people, oh, it's too bad, I hope you get over it soon. Let's just keep it in perspective here. Here's another pearl. This comes from my mentor and the co-founder of functional medicine, Dr. Jeffrey Bland, who said, I think it's important for us to remember that COVID is a lifestyle disease that's remediated, meaning addressed successfully, through the way we live, we act, we eat, and we socialize. It's the classic example of a personalized lifestyle healthcare issue. How you live your life determines whether or not you get hit by COVID-19. That's the bottom line. We will always be confronted with communicable viruses. It is how we as a global each manage our environment, our lifestyle, and social structure that determines its pathogenicity. And many of you have heard me say many times that every disease, as far as I know, every degenerative disease is a disease of inflammation, that the cell is on fire. And the question is it a brain cell or a lung cell? Is it gasoline or kerosene? But it's inflammation. And that is the lifestyle mechanism. Our lifestyle contributes to and pretty much sets the stage for what kind of inflammation we develop in our bodies. And many have heard me say the most common source of inflammation is a gasoline or kerosene, is what's on the end of your fork. And we'll be talking about diets in detail here in the upcoming days. But do know if there are certain foods, you know that, well, I really shouldn't eat so much of that. It's not good for me. Don't eat that food right now, because it's gasoline on the fire that may manifest in your lungs or your gut or wherever your genetic vulnerability is, right? So the pearl here is to understand it's not some ethereal unknown as to why people get sick with COVID-19. It's how we've lived our lives to this point, doing the best we can with what we know so far, that determines how inflamed our bodies are. And so even though we're doing the best we can, there's more to learn, and hopefully reducing your inflammatory cascade. So I did some graphs here, and I'm not good at doing graphs, so bear with me on this. It took me hours to do what I'm about to show you, but I hope the message comes across. If this bar on the left is the number of people who have been exposed to COVID-19, and we don't know if that's 70% of the population, 50%, 80%. There's different estimates, and we really don't know yet because the testing is not yet commonly available. We'll be talking about testing. I think it's on day 5. But this bar represents the number of people that have COVID right now. And it's the population that's exposed to the virus. And what have we done so far to reduce that number? Voluntary quarantine or isolation to prevent infection, a really important thing right now to be doing. Absolutely no questions, no challenge to that. Stay home. Now, in staying home, I didn't think I was going to talk about this, but I will. In the 1918 flu, the pandemic flu, that was a real nasty that killed millions and millions of people, they discovered what they called the outdoor factor, that people who were sick, if they were in tent hospitals and their beds were rolled outside on nice days, they got much better. And the percentage of hospital personnel that got sick was much less being in outdoors. And so doctors started opening windows if they couldn't get them outside, or putting them in the tent hospitals if possible, and wheeling them outside because it seemed to have a role to play. I tell you that now because while you're in quarantine, if you have a backyard and you're home, go out in the backyard for a little bit every day. If it's cold where you are, wear a jacket, but go outside for a little bit. You know, if you're feeling up to it, get outside, get outdoors. Don't go mingle with other people. If you don't have a backyard, it may be more difficult to do. But those of you that have a backyard, while you're in quarantine, get outside, get your family outside for a little bit every day. Play a little kickball with the kids, or if you have a croquet set. Oh, I haven't played croquet in 40 years, but you know, become creative with being outside. Play catch with a frisbee, or dad with a baseball glove, you know, and play catch with your son or your daughter. Just get outside for a little bit. Get active outside if you can. What we know about this virus is that the mean incubation period before you start noticing some side effects after you've been exposed is about 5 days. But there's a significant range of people outside that. But in general, within 5 days, you may get a little bit of a sore throat. You may get a little bit of gas or diarrhea if it's affecting your GI tract. You may have a mild cough, usually within 5 days or so. And there are those outside that, but that's what the science is currently telling us is common. At that point, we know that within the next 7 to 8 days, 20% of those people will have to go to the hospital. So 20% of those that have been exposed after about 5 days or so in general, they're going to have to go to the hospital because they're really scared and they're having symptoms. Now, we know, and the papers are really clear, and I'm going to give you the papers, the only reason that this is happening, why people go from 100% with mild symptoms down to that 20% that need to go to the hospital, is the strength of their immune systems. Is their immunity, and specifically the innate immunity? We have two kinds of immunity. Basically, there's the innate and the adaptive. And this is the innate, the first responders, if you will. If your innate immune system isn't cutting the mustard, it isn't doing the job the way it's supposed to, and your symptoms are getting worse, you may have to go to the hospital. Now, take that pearl of information for any time anyone in the family catches a cold or gets the flu. We've grown up believing it's okay to get the flu once a year or have a couple of colds a year. No, it's not. It indicates a compromised immune system. And there have been some studies that have shown people that have recurrent colds every year, they have a higher risk of other immune-related diseases down the road, as their lifestyle, unknowingly for most people, as their lifestyle is weakening their immune system, weakening their immune system, weakening their immune system. Now all of a sudden they get an autoimmune disease or a cancer or recurrent bladder infections or lung infections or sinus infections, whatever it is. But it's their immune system that isn't able to protect them that sets them up for that. And right now with COVID-19, those that have to go to the hospital, it's their compromised function of the innate immune system. So what does that mean? Right now, you got to go to the hospital. You go to the hospital, right? You do what you have to do. But in the back of your mind, say, hey, after I get through this, I need to figure out what is it in my lifestyle that set me up for this? How come my immune system isn't protecting me like the vast majority of people that are exposed to COVID-19. Over 80% of them exposed to COVID-19 get mild symptoms or no symptoms, right? So why is that happening to me? That's the deep dive that you want to do when you're out of crisis. So when symptoms increase and the patient goes to the hospital, what they're currently being told is to go home if they don't have shortness of breath, because that's the determining factor, because there are so many people going to the hospital right now. The only ones that they can accommodate are the ones that are having a hard time breathing and need to be on ventilators or respirators. Now, in the hospital, what are they doing in the hospitals? Sending people home if they're not life-threatened, and they're increasing the number of ventilators they have. They're increasing the personal protective equipment for the healthcare workers. They're getting more beds, they're getting more nurses, more ventilator therapists. They're doing the best they can to deal with the number of people that have this current crisis. That's really important to do. But the question comes up, what about the people who are sent home? What can they do? And that's what this series is about. For people who are in the 80%, so they don't fall into that 20% that have to go to the hospital, and for people that went to the hospital and they're sent home. So is there anything that we can do to reduce that 20% number that need to go to the hospital? That's one of the goals here of what we're talking about in these next few days. And this area where you've been exposed, but you don't have severe symptoms, what is it that you can do? And the answer is lifestyle. How are you currently living your life? What's on the end of your fork? Is it gasoline or kerosene? How do you handle stress? What about sleep? What's that got to do with this? So there are many different topics that we'll talk about that will give you pearls so that you can address this in the lifestyle phase, or if you've been sent home from the hospital, reduce the need that you'll have to go back to the hospital. That's our goal here in this series of coffees with me. By the way, my wife was so kind enough to make me a coffee. I've got it here in her container, in her Contigo container, which has little stars on it, or little diamonds and a little girly, like, cat face. And I'm saying, what? She said, well, just tell them that you ride a Harley. That it's okay, you can use mine, but you ride a Harley. So, all right, so enjoy your coffee while we're talking about this. Okay, here's another pearl for you. The former chief of the Center for Disease Control came on last week and said the risk of infection from coronavirus may be reduced by vitamin D. Now, this is a guy that has to be really careful about everything he says because he's going to be quoted, right? And he came on Fox News and he did this last week and talked about it. So I just want to touch base a little bit on vitamin D and show you the current theory as to why so high a percentage of people have died in northern Italy. So this came out from the British Medical Journal. This article came out and it said vitamin D deficiency has been reported to increase predisposition to systemic infections of all types and impaired immune response and even autoimmune diseases. Well, as some of you know, I teach about autoimmune diseases, and vitamin D is one of the basic 101s that we have to address and make sure you've got really good vitamin D levels. Vitamin D supplementation can prevent respiratory infections. This came from the British Medical Journal a few weeks ago. Italy is one of the countries with the highest prevalence of low vitamin D in Europe. What does that mean? Well, here are 3 different studies that they talked about. 700 women between the ages of 60 and 80 in Italy had values of vitamin D lower than 5 in 27% of those women, and lower than 12 in 76%. Now the goal, where we've always taught the safe goal to be protected, to have optimum values of vitamin D is between 50 and 75 nanograms per milliliter, ng per ml. Now in some countries, they don't use the ng per ml markers. They use other markers, but it's easy to convert with Google to whatever yours is. But you want to be between 50 and 75 NGs. The same group found a very high prevalence of low vitamin D in elderly women with diabetes. We've all heard that if you're diabetic and you get COVID-19, you're at higher risk of having a severe reaction. And another study found a winter prevalence of low vitamin D in 32% of the healthy postmenopausal women, meaning women who are a little more elderly, and to 80% in patients engaged in long-term rehab because of various neurological disorders. 82% of everybody in Italy, if they're in long-term rehab, had low vitamin D levels. Well, what does that mean? The huge amount of the population with low circulating vitamin D in Italy, and this is from the British Medical Journal, is due to the historical lack of a program of food fortification with vitamin D. It's hard to get vitamin D from food. There aren't many foods. Many of you have heard cold water fish. True, they're high in vitamin D. There are not many other foods. We have to get it either from supplements or from fish. Some people get it from dairy because dairy is enriched in most countries. But in Italy, they don't fortify the food with vitamin D. And it's called the Scandinavian paradox, because in the Northern European countries, around Scandinavian countries, their vitamin D levels are higher than in the Southern European countries like Italy. Well, wait a minute. If they're more south, they should be getting more sun, and the sun converts hormones in your skin to vitamin D. How come the vitamin D levels are higher in the Scandinavian countries? Because they fortify the food with vitamin D. And that is a primary mechanism suspected now in why Italy is having such a high percentage of people with severe reactions to this. So this is a pearl that we want to know about. And they summarize to say, we think reasonable, a message reinforcing the importance of maintaining vitamin D treatment in those already diagnosed with low vitamin D, and considering the supplementation with vitamin D of elderly that have other health conditions and are at home confinement. Now, we believe at the Institute for Functional Medicine, well, no, I shouldn't speak for the Institute, I'll speak for myself and my friends who are faculty at the Institute, but not for the Institute itself. I don't want to get involved in politics there. But we believe test, don't guess, meaning have your doctor do a test for you and see what your vitamin D level is. Is it between 50 and 75 NGs per ml? If it is, great, don't worry about it, you got plenty. If it's below that, take some supplements of vitamin D to get it up there. And in a couple of days, I'll talk about vitamin D in more detail and how to do that. But the idea of testing, and right now we can't go to our doctor's office for a test, but you can call your doctor and ask them if they have the blood spot test for vitamin D. It's a little finger prick, and you order the test, and it's sent to your house. You poke your finger, you put a drop of blood on the thing, you let it dry for a couple of minutes, and you mail it back, and you find out what your vitamin D level is. I'd recommend that everyone order enough test kits to do your entire family, so that everyone in the family, not just those that are sick, you want to know, do you have protection? And a finger prick blood spot test is easy to do. It's on our website, theDr.com, but go to your doctor, call your doctor's office, call your healthcare practitioner's office and say, can you get me the blood spot test for vitamin D? Simple to do, it's a no-brainer, it's not expensive, and it gives you accurate information to determine if you need to address a low vitamin D level. Okay? The second topic I want to talk about today in the pearls is sleep and how important sleep is. And this book came out a couple of years ago by Dr. Matthew Walker, who is a professor at Harvard on sleep. And as I read this book, my jaw dropped again and again and again. I didn't know some of these really important points about vitamin D. About sleep. It's kind of cute when you read his introduction. He talks about, as a graduate student, he was trying to pick his thesis and he thought, maybe I'll do something about sleep and how it affects our bodies and our immune system. it'll take me a few months to really dial down, and it shouldn't be too hard a topic. And so he starts to dive into it, and then he writes, 35 years later, I'm still trying to figure out all of the ways that sleep affects our body function. So it's a really cute introduction, but true. And your jaw will drop as you pick up his book. It's on Amazon. I'd recommend it as a must read for every family, at least one member of the family, to share with everyone else about how important sleep is. But here's a few statistics for you on sleep. One study, and this just came out from Dr. Andrew Weil's group at the University of Arizona, the School of Integrative Medicine. One study found that less than 5 hours of sleep increased the risk of developing rhinovirus, that's the flu, associated colds by 350% when compared to individuals who slept at least 7 hours per night. So if you get 5 hours of sleep or less for 7 consecutive days, if that's your habit, less than 7 hours sleep, you're 3.5 times more likely to develop a cold or a flu than people that sleep 7 hours a night. One of the benefits of sleeping and good sleep, quality sleep, is that we know we make more of a hormone called melatonin. And melatonin, now this is a little geeky here, this slide, melatonin's been shown to inhibit NF-kappa B. NF-kappa B is the major amplifier of inflammation in your body. Remember, inflammation at the cellular level, cells on fire, gasoline or kerosene, brain cell, kidney cell, immune cell. So NF-kappa B is the major amplifier of inflammation in the body. I often give the visual. When we were kids, my brother was in a band and I was the roadie, and we'd practice, and our parents sent us out in the garage. That's why they were called garage bands. Why? Because we had to take an extension cord, run it out the window of a bedroom, out to the garage, because there weren't electrical outlets in the garages in the 1950s, right? But we'd run the extension cord out there and then practice because it was so loud. The amplifiers were so loud. Our parents said, get that stuff out of the house, go out in the garage with that. And that's where the term garage bands came from. Well, NF-kappa B is the amplifier of inflammation in your body. And melatonin, when you make enough melatonin, it inhibits NF-kappa B, the major amplifier of inflammation. In fact, the age-related decline in melatonin production is one proposed mechanism to explain why children do not appear to have severe symptoms, but older adults do. Kids have more melatonin. Kids sleep, in general, kids sleep longer and deeper than adults do. Melatonin also reduces oxidative lung injury. That's kind of the fireworks going on in the lungs that causes so much lung damage, and inflammatory cell recruitment during viral infections. So melatonin is a damper on viral infections in your lungs. Positive effects of melatonin treatment have been reported in newborns with sepsis, and that's really serious. But when they give them melatonin, they respond so much better. In preterm infants with respiratory distress syndrome, that is extremely serious. Infants that are born early in life, preemies, and if they have difficulty breathing, melatonin helps their lungs function much, much better. And in newborns with respiratory distress syndrome. So giving melatonin to newborns who are having a hard time breathing reduces these inflammatory chemicals called IL-6, IL-8, tumor necrosis factor in the lungs and in the trachea. Melatonin is a good guy, and our bodies make more melatonin when we get enough sleep. That's one of the reasons why sleep is so important. And melatonin is one of those things that we can take as a supplement. And it's somewhere between 0.3 milligrams to 20 milligrams. My friends and I, we agree that usually about 3 milligrams is enough. Extremely safe. I don't know of any side effects of melatonin at those dosages, but it's something you might want to consider if sleep is a problem for you. And this graph came out in the Italian Journal of Pediatrics about melatonin when there is a viral infection in the lungs, and melatonin reduces the acute lung oxidative injury. It increases the antioxidant protection, which means protecting you. It decreases the pro-inflammatory, meaning the things that cause inflammation in your body. And it reduces the number of new cells that create inflammation. So melatonin is extremely helpful for your lungs when you're in distress. So let's go back to our graph now. If you are one of the 20% that has been sent to the hospital, the feeling when you're there is like this. You know, when you're on your way to the hospital, you don't know what you're in for, and it's really a scary time. And if you need a respirator, let's hope that there's one available. But our goal here in these sessions is to make this information available to you for safe, effective measures that you can take at home. So realize the first thing is lifestyle and what's on the end of your fork. Every bite you take is either going to reduce the inflammation or increase the inflammation. There are no neutrals. Let me say that again. There are no neutrals. The only neutral is healthy water. Aside from that, everything else has an effect in your gut, everything. And so your choice of what's on the end of your fork is going to be a determining factor on, is your immune system strong enough to get the job done that you want it to do. Now, we're going to make all of these videos available to you. We're going to do transcripts of these videos, meaning type them out so that you can read all of what I've just said to you. We're going to give you the slides. We're even going to give you the studies that I'm referencing in these slides. And we're going to give you the MP3s. And all of this is available to you. And it's available to you at no charge. What we're going to do here, if you can help us, I'm trying to keep my staff employed in doing this. Quite honestly, this took me, this one episode took me about 10 hours, and I've got 5 or 6 or 7 staff working 4, 5, 6, 8 hours a day to do this. So we're asking, if you can, to give us $37 for all of this, for all 7 days. If you want to, if you don't want to pay for it, it's all free. Just on the promo code on the order page, type in scholarship. That's all you have to do. And it's all free for you. So I want to make sure you understand this is all free. Every day is going to be free. But if you can help us here, that would be great. It would be very helpful. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for your kind attention. Enjoy your coffee, and I will see you tomorrow.